What's going on, everybody? It is the one and only Q here from Retro Q Gaming, and today we're going to talk about the unfortunate side effect of Resident Evil 8. Now, first off, before we go any further, later on in this video when we start talking about the actual plot point itself, well, it's going to be massive spoilers for the end of the game of Resident Evil 8. I'll give another warning before we talk about that stuff, but you can hang around for the rest of the video if you don't mind spoilers or whatever. But anyway, what are we talking about here? Well, there is one specific, I don't know if you would call it a plot point or a plot mechanic or a story point or just a way of storytelling that's used in multiple different games or whatever it is, but there's one of those that does appear in this game that is arguably, possibly what I consider the absolute worst point in storytelling, the worst plot mechanic that can be included in any game whatsoever. Now, just to give you an overall heads up before we talk about any of that stuff, I do like Resident Evil 8. I've played it multiple times. Hell, I've already finished it 3 times and I'm in the middle of my 4th playthrough. I'm going back again and again and again to try to get all the upgrades and whatnot. The first time I played it on standard, took me 8 hours to finish. The second time was hardcore, took me 5 hours. And my most recent one that I did yesterday was a casual speedrun in 2 hours 21 minutes. And while I'm not going to get into the nitty-gritty of all the details and specs and all the different stories and plot points and what I thought about the game overall, well, I guess I shouldn't even say overall, because I do like the game overall, I enjoy it, I recommend it, but I'm not going to get into all the details and specifics, and we're not going to sit here for 20 minutes doing a review of the game, essentially. But now onto the main topic of the video. So, like I said, there is one big important thing that is a major spoiler towards the end of the game that I absolutely hate that Resident Evil 8 or Resident Evil Village has included in it. And this has been used in other games and all as well, and it will completely destroy, in several other cases, any credibility that the game will have. Now, I feel like it doesn't take away the complete credibility of Resident Evil 8. The rest of the game stands up enough within itself, but many of the other games don't. Now, remember I promised I'd give a little bit of a warning so I don't go out and spoil everything. Consider this your warning. We've got a couple more seconds, maybe 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, before we start getting into the whole thing. So if you haven't clicked off or muted or whatever it is by now and you get spoiled, it's your own fault. So what are we talking about here anyway? Well, one of the biggest issues I have in games is that something that makes pretty much no sense throughout the entirety of the game, or even sometimes when it does technically make sense, well, usually it only makes sense in the logic of the game director and it comes across very poorly, is when the outcome of the game completely negates the game and can essentially make no sense. So let me give you Resident Evil 8's example. At the very end of the game, remember this is also a direct sequel to Resident Evil 7, so the same thing should have taken effect during there. But during the ending of Resident Evil 8, or at least right before it, you find out that Ethan Winters is dead. He died during the plot of Resident Evil 7. It doesn't specifically say where he dies during the plot of Resident Evil 7. That makes him come back as the whole Mold character, if you will. You might remember Mold, yeah, I know that sounds strange to say out loud, was the main enemy or main cause, if you will, of Resident Evil 7. So essentially, Ethan has become a Mold being. You only find this out right at the end of Resident Evil 8, but the problem with that is it completely negates. Let's just take Resident Evil 7 off the equation for here. Let's say it happened right at the very end of Resident Evil 7, so it would only apply to Resident Evil 8. Well, essentially, it renders the entirety of that kind of moot. In a sense that if you were to die at all in any way, shape or form, or like earlier in the game when Ethan gets part of his hand cut off, or when he gets his other hand entirely cut off, or any time you die, it should be completely moot. And the problem is it doesn't do that. It essentially treats him like a regular human being until it's convenient for the plot. And to me, that is absolutely awful storytelling. When your ending can completely negate the entire story of the game, it's absolutely terrible. Another example of this is one of the higher profile ones from about 8 years ago. One that I've despised in pretty much every way is BioShock Infinite. The ending of that game completely negates everything you do throughout the course of the entire game. All the plot points, all the characters, all the character developments. It's absolutely awful. Now, this isn't to be confused with something like non-committal endings. For example, The Last of Us 1 was pretty much 99% from start to finish great. The only issue I had with the ending of The Last of Us 1, for example, was that they were afraid to commit to a yes or no answer. Leaving it up to your interpretation is complete bullshit. Tell your story. Commit. Don't be a pussy. Don't be afraid of alienating certain fans or pissing off certain fans in that way. But again, that's not even the same thing as BioShock Infinite and Resident Evil 8, so it's not to get the two confused. But in the case of Resident Evil 8, while that was really annoying towards the end of it, overall, the rest of the game and the story and the quality of the gameplay and the mechanics and all, it was good enough to keep me still enjoying the game. Now, of course, in BioShock Infinite's case, that wasn't the problem because it was a shite game overall, but you get the idea. It's still a massive, what's the word I'm looking for here? Is it bugbear? I don't think that might be it, but maybe it is. But either way, it's one of the most annoying things that can be done in any type of story. And unfortunately, it has to tarnish Resident Evil 8 in that way. I'm still going to be able to replay it. I'm still going to be able to enjoy it. I just can't take anything with the story seriously anymore. But at least I've got my money's worth.